We want to take you to Minneapolis, where Vice President JD Vance is speaking following a roundtable with local leaders and community members as Operation Metro Surge continues. He's saying state and local officials are not cooperating with federal law enforcement and causing problems themselves.
Tell them to cooperate, because we could have immigration enforcement operate as smoothly and without the chaos that we see in Austin, Texas, or Memphis, Tennessee, or even rural parts of the state of Minnesota. All we need is a little cooperation. I guarantee we're going to do the best to be professional, to respect people's rights, to not do anything that we don't have to do in order to enforce immigration laws, but it would make our lives a lot easier, it would make our officers a lot safer, and it would make Minneapolis much less chaotic if we had a little bit of cooperation from the state and local officials. With that, I'll shut up and take some questions. Thank you, guys.
Vice President Vance, a local school district here is alleging ICE agents detaining a 5-year-old after preschool on Tuesday. We've also seen multiple American citizens detained by ICE or harassed by ICE in the last 6 weeks. Are you proud of how your administration is conducting this immigration crackdown here in Minnesota right now?
Well, I'm proud of the fact that we're standing behind law enforcement, and I'm proud of the fact that we're enforcing the country's laws. But, you asked a question about this 5-year-old kid. I actually saw this terrible story while I was coming to Minneapolis. We had just left Toledo, Ohio this morning for an economic messaging event. And I see this story, and I'm a father of a 5-year-old, actually, a 5-year-old little boy. And I think to myself, oh, my God, this is terrible. How did we arrest a 5-year-old? Well, I do a little bit more follow-up research. And what I find is that the 5-year-old was not arrested, that his dad was an illegal alien, and then when they went to arrest his illegal alien father, the father ran. So the story is that ICE detained a 5-year-old. Well, what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to let a 5-year-old child freeze to death? Are they not supposed to arrest an illegal alien in the United States of America? If the argument is that you can't arrest people who have violated our laws because they have children, then every single parent is going to be completely given immunity from ever being the subject of law enforcement. That doesn't make any sense. No one thinks that makes any sense. Now, there are so many of these cases like that where if you just understand the context, there have been a number of situations that I've looked into personally where I say, wait a second, we don't want ICE arresting American citizens. They're supposed to be enforcing the immigration laws against illegal aliens. So then I look into it and I find out that the American citizen who was arrested took a swing at an ICE officer. You can't have that happen. And of course they have to defend themselves. And of course they have the right to detain somebody who assaults a law enforcement officer. Now, this is my point. Do we want these things to happen? Do we want these arrests to be so chaotic? No, we don't. These guys want it least of all. But if we had a little cooperation from local and from local and state officials, I think the chaos would go way down in this community.
President.
Go ahead.
After the Renee Good shooting, sir, the administration seemed to suggest...
Yeah, well, you can go next.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought you pointed it
No,
out.
it's fine. I'll take both.
After the Renee Good shooting, sir, the administration seemed to... After the Renee Good shooting, the administration seemed to suggest that ICE officers enjoyed near complete immunity. But today you told the Washington Examiner that when appropriate, the administration might take disciplinary actions against ICE agents. So is that a change of opinion? And if so, why the change in tone?
No, I didn't say, and I don't think any other official within the Trump administration said that officers who engaged in wrongdoing would enjoy immunity. That's absurd. What I did say is that when federal law enforcement officers violate the law, that is typically something that federal officials would look into. We don't want these guys to have kangaroo courts. We want them to actually have real due process, real investigation, because again, sometimes they're accused of wrongdoing, and it turns out when you learn the context, they didn't actually do anything wrong. But of course we're going to investigate these things. Of course we're investigating the Renee Good shooting, but we're investigating them in a way that respects people's rights and that ensures that if somebody did something wrong, yes, they're going to face disciplinary action, but we're not going to judge them in the court of public opinion. I've spoken at length on this particular case. I think that Renee Good's death is a tragedy. I also think that she rammed an ICE officer with her car. So the tragedy here is multi-layered. The tragedy is there was a misunderstanding. The tragedy is that Renee Good lost her life. The tragedy is that you have ICE officers who are going into communities where they're worried that if they call 911, no one's going to come to help them. That is what produces this terrible situation, and it's something state and local officials here in Minnesota could solve. Yes, sir.
Could you give us a message towards the March for Life tomorrow, especially regarding this cooperation and family values? It's a shame the kids have to get caught up in all this, and towards that threat?
Well, it is a shame that kids have to get caught up in this. I am speaking at March for Life tomorrow. I'm pro-life, and I'm very excited to speak there. I want to talk about local law enforcement, but, I am, as a child, I saw people in my family get arrested. It's terrible. It's heartbreaking. It's chaotic. It's traumatic for the kids. I can recognize that, and I can recognize that we got to support these kids, while on the other hand saying that just because you're a parent doesn't mean that you get complete immunity from law enforcement. And I think we have to hold both of those thoughts in our head at the same time. We've got to be sympathetic to the kids who are caught up in some of these enforcement actions. We've also got to say we have to enforce the law without bias, with fairness, but we've got to enforce the law.
Mr. Vice President.
Speaking about local government, there was a clash in St. Cloud roughly a week ago, and their mayor said they haven't heard about ICE being in the city. And how does ICE kind of proactively work with these local agencies? What are those policies, and what's your response to that allegation?
You said there was an altercation in St. Cloud. Yeah.
After the incident, the mayor said that ICE did not communicate with them that they were in the city for a major operation. The police chief did not know about the operation at the time. Could you talk a little bit about proactive communication with local law enforcement?
Yeah, it's one of the takeaways. I've talked with these guys before we came on the stage, but during our roundtable and some of the other conversations we've had, communication, we absolutely want to ensure there's good communication between federal officials and state and local officials, and I'm sure that we can do better on that. We absolutely want to make sure that we are communicating, but that also requires a two-way street, and that's the point that I make about state and local officials. These guys will absolutely communicate with state and local officials. They'll tell people if they have to do an enforcement operation in a particular municipality, but part of that is they also want to ensure that if they're communicating about their whereabouts, that's not being used as a weapon against them. Sometimes they tell people where they're going, and then they find out that their agents' faces are on on Reddit or on some social media thread saying, here's this guy, we know he's going to be at this place at this exact time. So that communication has got to be a two-way street. These guys are going to communicate with business leaders, with local officials, with state officials, but we also need the local officials and state officials to do a good job of protecting people when they're in their communities. We're not asking, by the way, we don't want any police officer in this community, in this state, to help us do immigration enforcement. We've got that. But if a protester shows up and that protester turns violent against our immigration officers, we really, really need the cooperation of our local partners. We haven't gotten it yet, but I think if we do, we really can lower the temperature. Yeah.
Earlier this week, a colleague at the Washington Post reported today that an ICE memo allows agents to enter people's houses without a judge's warrant. What do you say to people who are concerned about this violating the Constitution, and how much is this tactic being used?
Yeah, so I saw that story, and the story is like so much that I read in the mainstream media. It's missing a whole lot of context, and when you appreciate the context, it makes sense. No one is saying, look, there are exceptions. For example, a crazy exception, if somebody is fired at from inside a house, they don't need a warrant to go inside that person's house. There are very narrow exceptions to the warrant requirement where law enforcement officers don't need a warrant if, for example, they're an imminent threat of their lives. But what we've said and what ICE has proposed, what the Department of Homeland Security really has proposed in the Department of Justice, is that we can get administrative warrants to enforce administrative immigration law. Now, it's possible, I guess, that the courts will say no, and of course, if the courts say no, we would follow that law, but nobody is talking about doing immigration enforcement without a warrant. We're talking about different types of warrants that exist in our system. Typically what happens, not always, but typically in the immigration system, those are handled by administrative law judges. So we're talking about getting warrants from those administrative law judges, and then of course, with other cases, you get judges, or you get warrants from a judge. That's very consistent with the practice of American law. I'm sure the courts will weigh in on that, but we're never going to enter somebody's house without some kind of a warrant, unless, of course, somebody's firing on an officer or they have to do something in order to protect themselves.
Follow up on that. Do you believe that you can forcibly enter with an administrative warrant, or would that be a violation of the Fourth Amendment?
Well, our understanding is that you can enforce the immigration laws of the country under an administrative order if you have an administrative warrant. That's what we think. That's our understanding of the law. That's our best faith attempt to understand the law. Again, this is something courts will weigh in on. I won't speak to that. But yes, most immigration law in our country is not done through the criminal system with the judge. It's done through the administrative law system. We're going to continue that practice just as they did in the Biden administration or any other administration.
Was there anything that you heard or saw today that would cause you to counsel the president to invoke the Insurrection Act? And then also, did you meet or talk to the ICE agent who was involved in the Renee Good incident?
I did not talk to him today. I talked to some of his colleagues. Your question on the Insurrection Act is interesting. I've tried to understand this as well as I possibly could. And my understanding is what the Insurrection Act, what invoking the Insurrection Act would allow the federal government to do is that it would allow the federal government to use the military for local law enforcement operations. Right now, we don't think that we need that. Now, the president could change his mind. Of course, things could get worse. But right now, we think that federal law enforcement officers can do the job of federal law enforcement. Now, what I do worry about, again...
Vice President JD Vance right now speaking in Minnesota. He defended the administration's use of administrative, not judicial warrants and going out and arresting people in the country illegally. He said that will likely get tied up in the courts. And he just said there that as of this point, he doesn't think there would be a need to invoke the Insurrection Act. We're going to keep monitoring this. We're going to take a break. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Stay with us.